good. You good. You good. Don't stop it.
Bass.
It's the show that will get you thinking, and where the topics are hot. Feel free to comment whether we agree or not, 'cause he's got something to say.
Sirwalterj. Sirwalterj.
He's got something to say. Sirwalterj.
Sirwalterj.
Reporting live 7 days a week, always on time, but his time is not free. So Walter Jones, always on fleek. Latest trending topics had you jumping out your seat.
He's got something to say.
Come on in. The water's fine.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I think there's a question of the day. There's a question of the day somewhere here. Oh, okay. Here's a question. It's a good question, and I'm gonna see if I can deal with this question because it is a question that's dealing with what's going on over in East Coast, down in Florida. All right. Questions: how do we determine what is an act of God versus what is allowed by God? That's good. How do we determine what is an act of God versus what is allowed by God? Example: tornadoes and hurricanes are called acts of God, whereas a plane that crashes because of weather is deemed bad weather and may be pilot error, but not an act of God. That's good. Does Satan contribute to any of this chaos? Yes and no. Yes and no. This hurricane, Helene, it was a tropical depression, and it came from the west part of the Florida. It rose up to the Florida Big Bend area, and it went up and it started hitting you folks in Georgia. Notice how all catastrophes are called acts of God. Sometimes your insurance policy may say acts of nature, but in many cases it's acts of God. And I find that offensive because, based off of a question, the acts of God is used for catastrophes, but when there are people who have been healed of sicknesses, and when somebody escape some type of catastrophe or ailment or car crash, it might be even a car crash and it wrecks the car, but a person gets out and walk. All right. All these wonderful things that happens to people is never an act of God. Why is that chance, happenstance, or you're lucky? But God's name is used. And this is why I like that quote from that movie. What is that dinosaur movie? That quote from the dinosaur movie, Steven Spielberg's dinosaur movie. What's it called, y'all? And he quoted about God, the guy who played he played the spider. Well, not spider. He played the ant. No, the fly. The fly. Yeah, he played the fly. What was his name, you all? Dr. Ian Malcolm. Man creates dinosaur, quote. Goldberg. Goldblum. What's his name? Jeff? Is that his name? Jeff Goldblum, April. Yeah. God creates dinosaurs. God destroys dinosaurs. God creates man. and man destroys God. That was one of the greatest quotes in movie history to me. Goldblum. Yeah. God creates man, and man destroys God. Now we know. That's a play on words. But man has destroyed God in his conscience. And he destroyed God in the children that was reared from this man. So let me see if I can deal with this. Hurricane Katrina was a horrible, horrible hurricane. But what happened with Hurricane Katrina is the answer to Hurricane Katrina by some people who were Christians who said that it was due to the voodoo worship in New Orleans. Anybody heard that before? Whenever a tornado or hurricane or some natural catastrophe happens in a certain area, they say it's because and it's due to the sin in a certain area. So what God decided to do with Hurricane Katrina is to bring that water down there and to wipe out all those people due to voodoo. Yet he decided to leave California. He left the gays alone in California. He left the gays alone in Atlanta, Georgia. Jason Shepard, bless you, man. He left the racism alone in Boston, Massachusetts. He left the crime alone. I'm talking I'm talking organized crime alone in Chicago. He left all these other places alone. And voodoo upsets him so much that he decided to wipe out those people. And it didn't just hit New Orleans, it hit other states, even up in the Mississippi, what have you. And there's voodoo all up in there too. You all come up with all kind of dumb excuses why a natural disaster happens to certain people in certain regions. So what happens is God has created the laws of nature. Earthquake is underground, plate, tectonic shifts, what have you. And that's why it only happens in certain areas. Tornadoes, hurricanes, typhoons and cyclones and mudslides and all this stuff is a result of each other come clashing among each other, which cause these different types of occurrences. There's wildfires because it's so dry in California, and these people building these houses made of sticks. Okay. A tsunami is an underwater earthquake. All these things is God's laws of nature. So someone asked, well, what about Satan? Does he create this stuff? Does he have his hand in it? Well, he can have his hand in it, but the only time we really see that Satan had his hand in it, and we'll see it later on, is during the time of Job. Again, let me rehearse to you that Satan had to go to God for permission, and then God says, go ahead, do whatever you need to do. And then Satan came down and used the nature that God created to wipe out many of Job's, his children and his cattle and his land, his houses and all that stuff. Satan was allowed to pull the switch. And then God says, all right, I'm done with you. Look at Saul, who had an evil spirit. It says that the evil spirit came from God, right? Well, there's no evil in God. That is just a Jewish parallel or Elizabethan way of saying God used Satan to do that, and then he pulled him back because he's got a leash on him. Y'all understand what I'm saying? So, it is God, not Satan, who controls the weather. Exodus chapter 9:29, Psalms 135:6. God controls the skies and the rain. Psalm 77:16. God controls the wind. Mark 4:35. God upholds and sustains the universe. Hebrews chapter 1:3. God has power over the clouds. Job 37:11. God has power over lightning. Psalms 18:14. God has power over nature. Job 26. All things were created through Jesus Christ. Colossians 1, 16. Nothing was made except made through Jesus Christ. And we know this because every Sunday, your weekly tithing teaching tells me that God determines the weather. You know how I know? Because every time y'all go to Malachi chapter 3, you tell me that if I would open up a window of heaven and pour you out a blessing. That is not some beautiful poetry in motion. That is not some spiritual thing that he's doing. All right. That is not a metaphor. He is literally saying, if you do this, I will allow it to rain, physical rain, on your crops. Why? I need to rain not just to feed or quench your crops' thirst, but I need it to do that and pour because the grasshoppers are eating your crops. When you read it in Elizabethan language, you will screw it up. He says, the devourer. Who is that? That is the grasshopper. That is the pestilence. Mm-hmm. That is those hoppity little things. That is Jiminy Cricket is hungry and he is tearing up your stuff. And so he says, if you obey me, I'm going to open up the windows, which is the clouds. And I'm going to have it to rain on those crops. It's going to drown out the grasshopper and it will water on your crop and it will grow and you will take the first part of that, which is first fruits, on and on. Y'all get it now? So if you're going to quote that, then you should know that God has control over the weather. How do we know again? Because Deuteronomy chapter 11 and 17, he says, I will shut up the windows of heaven if you don't obey me. There will be a drought. And then Elijah prayed that it not rain. Who did he pray to? Satan? No. He prayed to God for 3 years and 6 months. It didn't rain. It's a great question, y'all. So Romans chapter 8, 19 to 21. What does it say? The creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, not Satan, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. So these elements, tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, typhoons, cyclones, mudslides, wildfires, all this is under the control and the auspices of God himself. But he don't have to do anything because the laws of nature work. When those 10 plagues hit the Egyptians, God himself wasn't doing one by one with his hand. He did one and the rest of them followed because it was the laws of nature for something else to happen if there's going to be all these frogs. The fall of humanity into sin had effects on everything, including the world we inhabit. And everything in creation is subject to frustration and decay. But here's the ultimate answer. Sin is the ultimate cause of natural disasters, just as it is the cause of death and disease and suffering. So God told Solomon, if my people, which are called by my name. Well, you got to read what he said before that. Pestilence and disease. He said, if I send it, if I send it. So that whole thing that happened during the pandemic, if I send it, y'all was blaming the devil on it. Y'all was blaming this on it. He said, if I send it, he's got the control. He's got the whole world in his hands. And Jesus told y'all that roars and rumors of wars and these weather patterns in diverse places and all these things. He said all this stuff is just the earth is groaning. She's pregnant. And because of the sin of Adam, it happens. It happens. So all we can do now is pray for those who are in the route, in that way of Helene, Hurricane Helene, and other hurricanes are coming. I live near Tornado Alley. It's nothing for us to hear a siren go off here. All right? You may live where the wildfires are. There's nowhere in all 50 states where you're safe from nature. Nowhere. If you live in Rapid City, South Dakota, and you think you're safe because none of that stuff happens, you are fooling yourself. You are standing on gas. And at any time, that gas can decide through the laws of nature to come up out that ground and kill all of y'all in the Dakotas. You better hear me. None of you, wherever you live in America, is safe from any kind of natural disaster. When you read the book of Revelation, then God himself is going to answer this question that our dear sister presented to us tonight. He's giving you the answer. When the 7 churches of Asia Minor will be given this message from John the Revelator, and then God is going to remove them from the hour of temptation. In chapter 4, you see them already in heaven crying, holy, holy, holy. Chapter 5 comes on the scene. That chapter opens up with all kinds of fear and death and mayhem and worry and some woes. From 5 all the way towards the end, the church has been removed. And then God himself is going to say, here, boy. Who's that barking? The devil. The dragon. God's going to say, he could be like, okay, you see that collar? Hey, Jesus, remove that collar from that boy. Yeah, remove that leash. Take the leash off. Let him run wild. And Satan going to come down here and act a darn fool. Who's doing that? God. Jesus says, I see Satan fall from heaven like lightning. All right? You can interpret that 2 different kind of ways. He fell from heaven. Lucifer did. But Satan's going to come down again. But this time, he's going to be down here. He's not just going to be the prince of the power of the air. He's going to physically come down here, set up his unrighteous trinity, Satan, the false prophet, and the Antichrist. And the 3 of them going to wreak havoc on this earth, and billions, not thousands or millions, billions will die. So if you want to know who operates and who's got the power to turn on the water and turn it off, God does. He owns the water. He's the Water Reformation Department in Chicago. Well, he's the president over that. He owns it. And he's going to turn it on. And you don't want to be here during that time, and you really don't want your children to be here during that time, so you just might want to witness to your own cheering first. You understand? Michelle Carter says Los Angeles, California had an earthquake earlier today. Not a bad, but see, this is what they do. Michelle Carter, so good to see you, by the way. My brother Rodney and I was talking about you today. We are so encouraged by you and how you bless us the way you do. You and them Carter boys. All right? So Great question. I hope you got the answer. Let's pray for those people who are over there. And it's bad, y'all. It's so bad. I was sent a video by someone, and I forwarded to a few people in my staff. Where is it? The woman was in her house and she was being flooded. Here it is. Here. I'm going to go to Facebook, see if I can play it. I'm going to show y'all how bad it is. Some people, they were offered shelter, and some people decided to stick it out. Why? Because in many cases, most people are not affected to where they think that they're going to die or anything. Because my brother Michael lives down there. And he kind of hard-headed too. So they figured it hasn't happened since I've been living here. It's not going to happen until it happens. All right. Let me see if I can play this. Let me see if I can play this. Yeah, here it is. That's bad. That's bad. All she could do was film her stuff being destroyed. That's all she could do. And we don't know her situation. We don't know if she was able to get to a shelter or she waited out. All we know is that water got up so high, she knew it was coming in. So she just filmed. All she could do was film. So for those of us who live up north, we don't know anything about that kind of weather. We don't know. But let me tell you, we get tornadoes. And y'all seen the movie Twister? Whew. It's bad. Which is worse? They both the same beast. Let me get out of here.